Europe's Green Revolution was supposed to deliver independence. Independence from Russian gas, independence from Middle Eastern oil, independence from China's dominance in clean technology supply chains. Yet by mid-2025, that independence has taken a new shape. Europe is now anchored to one partner, Canada. The European Union's Clean Industrial Deal, launched in early 2025, urged member states to build 100 GW of renewables annually and to target strategic autonomy in critical raw materials. But Europe lacks the mines, the refining capacity, and the deep cost base to achieve this alone. Into that gap steps Canada, a resource-rich nation with political stability, established trade ties under CETA, and a government openly mobilizing all tools to build new infrastructure for Germany and Europe. This is not simply trade. It is an influence. By supplying hydrogen, critical minerals, and logistics, Canada is becoming an indispensable node in Europe's industrial future. And that means the center of transatlantic power is shifting. In today's video, we uncover Europe's green revolution now depends on Canada, and it's changing the balance of power. Welcome to GeoCapitalist, the channel where we decode how nations transform geography into wealth and influence. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe, because each week we uncover the silent strategies shaping tomorrow's economy. Europe's climate ambition has always been bold, yet bold ambition alone is not enough. As Brussels marshals its resources into electrification and self-reliance, the map of power beneath the surface is changing. Canada, long perceived as a resource exporter to the US, now plays a far more strategic role, a sovereign supplier of clean energy, critical minerals, and logistical corridors. Berlin, Brussels, and Ottawa are performing a choreography of infrastructure deals, supply chain realignments, and long-term contract frameworks. The result? Europe's clean energy future no longer just depends on wind and solar. It depends on how well Canada executes the partnerships, builds the terminals, and integrates into Europe's industrial plans. Meanwhile, the US watches from the sidelines, its position eroding. This story is not about green virtue. It is about power, predictability, and profit. The most visible symbol of this shift is infrastructure. In August 2025, Canada and Germany signed a joint declaration of intent to establish a transatlantic hydrogen trade corridor, deepen cooperation on critical minerals, and accelerate midstream processing. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney met in Berlin to unveil the pact, a framework that merges Europe's engineering precision with Canada's resource depth. The agreement didn't just outline exports, it built an economic ecosystem. It synchronized investment banks, logistics routes, and regulatory standards, allowing hydrogen produced in Atlantic Canada to meet EU certification under the bloc's new green fuel standard. Canada's East Coast ports, Stephenville, Halifax, and Belledune, once designed for LNG, are being re-engineered for green hydrogen and ammonia exports. Massive electrolyzer projects backed by Air Liquide, Everwind Fuels, and Fortescue Future Industries are under construction, while new offshore wind leases are being auctioned to power these conversion hubs. In Quebec and Ontario, mining districts such as Abitibi and Sudbury are scaling production of nickel, lithium, and cobalt for Europe's EV supply chains. On the European side, Germany's €1.1 billion Raw Materials Fund and the EU's Critical Raw Materials Act are being tested through these Canadian-linked ventures, ensuring long-term contracts that bypass Chinese refiners. But what's unfolding is more than ports and pipelines. It's the rewiring of industrial geography. New digital corridors are being mapped alongside energy routes, data cables, and smart logistics systems tracking every shipment from Newfoundland to Hamburg. The Atlantic is becoming a single connected production basin, one where power doesn't flow east to west, but through an integrated grid of energy, data, and capital. Canada, once a regional supplier, is now part of Europe's industrial backbone. And as the lines of trade shift, so do the lines of power. Europe's dependence on foreign sources for critical minerals has become its most silent vulnerability, and Canada is filling that gap with precision. In 2024, over 95% of Europe's rare earth imports originated from China, Malaysia, and Russia combined, a statistic that sent alarm bells ringing in Brussels. The European Commission's 2025 Energy Security Review called this the Achilles heel of the green transition. Ottawa responded decisively, unveiling a $4 billion Canadian critical minerals strategy, expanding funding for exploration, refining, and battery production. But unlike past export relationships, this one was designed around trust and transparency. Every ton of lithium or nickel shipped to Europe now moves through traceable digital systems, verified under joint EU-Canada environmental protocols. In August 2025, the Mertz-Carney Declaration went beyond hydrogen. It formally listed lithium rare earth elements, copper, tungsten, gallium, germanium, and nickel as priority materials for joint strategic production. German industrial giants, BASF, Siemens Energy, and Volkswagen, have already secured multi-year offtake agreements with Canadian miners such as Vale Base Metals and Nemaska Lithium, ensuring direct supply that bypasses Chinese refiners. Meanwhile, Ottawa's new Strategic Processing Initiative is investing in midstream refining facilities in Ontario and Manitoba, co-financed by the European Investment Bank and Canada's own Export Development Corporation. For Europe, this partnership means sovereignty, a guarantee that its clean energy infrastructure won't depend on unstable supply chains or opaque practices. For Canada, it means elevation, moving from a raw material exporter to a standard setter in responsible extraction. As Brussels drafts the next phase of its green industrial plan, many of its compliance metrics, from carbon intensity to labor transparency, are being modeled on Canada's system. This is how influence is built in the 21st century, not through dominance but dependability. In a world where reliability is the rarest commodity, Canada's credibility has become Europe's most strategic import. Canada's partnership with Europe is no longer confined to political communiques or environmental summits. It's turning into a financial architecture. Across the Atlantic provinces, investment pipelines worth more than 480 billion Canadian dollars are now linked to Europe's clean energy agenda. Ottawa's new Green Export Credit Facility, announced in early 2025, guarantees long-term financing for projects that serve both domestic and European decarbonization goals. That means German, Dutch, and French investors can pour capital into Canadian infrastructure, ports, electrolyzer plants, and critical mineral refineries with sovereign-level protection. The result is a surge of cross-border joint ventures. In Nova Scotia, Everwind Fuels and Eon Hydrogen are finalizing a €3 billion production hub feeding the Hamburg terminal. In Quebec, Hydro-Quebec and Volkswagen Energy Solutions are co-developing a battery-grade nickel refinery. The numbers tell the story. Europe's direct investment stock in Canada grew 22% in a single year, the fastest in over a decade. Pension giants like Allianz and Caisse de Dépôt are treating green energy corridors as long-term sovereign assets. Unlike oil, whose value depends on price swings, these contracts are indexed to policy, guaranteed by carbon credit systems and 25-year offtake commitments. This turns energy infrastructure into financial infrastructure. Every ton of Canadian hydrogen, every shipment of lithium hydroxide represents not only trade, but a bond of mutual fiscal confidence between democracies. At the same time, Canadian technology firms are riding the wave. Startups specializing in hydrogen compression, carbon capture, and AI-driven logistics are attracting venture funding from European innovation funds, creating a two-way flow of capital and expertise. Toronto's fintech ecosystem is designing carbon tracking platforms that Berlin and Brussels intend to adopt under the EU's Digital Green Deal. What's emerging is a transatlantic investment alliance that converts sustainability into strategy. Canada is no longer the periphery of Europe's green transformation. It's the financial hinge on which that transformation turns. And as capital follows certainty, influence follows capital. The most profound change in the transatlantic relationship isn't economic, it's strategic. For the first time in decades, Canada and Europe are writing Western policy without Washington in the room. When Prime Minister Mark Carney met Chancellor Friedrich Merz in Berlin this summer, the symbolism mattered as much as the signature. The two leaders described their hydrogen and minerals pact as an alliance for industrial security, language once reserved for NATO communiques. A few weeks later, Ottawa joined Brussels in drafting a defense industry cooperation framework, granting Canadian firms access to European procurement networks that traditionally answered only to the Pentagon. Behind these moves lies a deliberate logic. Europe wants partners who can deliver materials and technology without the volatility of U.S. domestic politics. Canada offers that reliability and gains quiet leverage in return. Its diplomats now sit on EU strategic energy task forces. Its scientists co-author Europe's clean tech standards. Its ports are referenced in European Commission energy briefings. The result is a new axis of coordination that bypasses Washington's veto points. For the United States, this is unsettling. The old assumption that North American resources automatically flowed south before crossing the Atlantic is breaking down. The North Atlantic corridor is no longer a triangle with the U.S. at its apex. It's a horizontal alliance linking European consumers directly to Canadian producers. Every ship that leaves Halifax or Stephenville represents more than energy. It represents autonomy. China and Russia, watching from the periphery, understand what this means. The West's center of gravity is recalibrating toward nations that blend democratic governance with resource abundance. In this context, Canada becomes more than a friendly neighbor. It becomes a strategic fulcrum, balancing American power with European need. Influence in the 21st century belongs to the supplier that guarantees certainty. And right now, that supplier is Canada. Every revolution, even a green one, carries its own fragility. Canada's rise as Europe's energy backbone is impressive, but its success now depends on precision timing and flawless execution. The hydrogen export terminals in Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick are ambitious, yet only one, the Everwind Fuels facility in Point Tupper, is scheduled to ship by 2026. The rest hinge on permitting, financing, and grid integration. A delay of even a year could allow competitors like Norway or Morocco to seize contracts under Europe's Hydrogen Bank subsidy scheme. Meanwhile, global demand for critical minerals is accelerating faster than infrastructure can keep up. According to the International Energy Agency, lithium demand alone is set to triple by 2030, but most of Canada's refining plants are still in development. If Ottawa underestimates the speed of Europe's transition or overestimates its own production capacity, the leverage it now enjoys could evaporate. Then there's the geopolitical chessboard. The United States, feeling sidelined, has begun offering counter-incentives through its Inflation Reduction Act 2.0, designed to attract European investors back to U.S. soil. At the same time, China is quietly courting African and South American producers to lock up new mineral streams, ensuring that even if Europe escapes one dependency, another might soon emerge. For Canada, this means walking a narrow line, expanding fast enough to meet European demand, but not so fast that quality or environmental standards are compromised. Domestic politics add another variable. Indigenous partnerships, environmental assessments, and regional elections could slow projects if coordination falters. Yet paradoxically, these checks and balances are also what make Canada credible in Europe's eyes. Transparency breeds trust. The Green Corridor is both an opportunity and a test of whether Canada can scale at industrial speed without losing the moral authority that makes it valuable in the first place. Step back, and the pattern becomes unmistakable. The so-called green transition was never just about climate. It was about control. Europe's push for energy sovereignty has redrawn its alliances, and Canada has emerged as the quiet architect of that new order. By anchoring the supply of hydrogen, nickel, and rare earth elements, it isn't just selling resources, it's selling stability, the most valuable commodity in a volatile century. Every container that leaves Halifax, every tanker filled with hydrogen or lithium concentrate, reinforces a new kind of transatlantic power. One built not on weapons or ideology, but on competence. In this landscape, Washington's dominance is no longer assumed. While U.S. politics oscillates between climate ambition and protectionist backlash, Canada and Europe are constructing what analysts call a trust alliance, a framework where shared regulation, transparent financing, and green infrastructure form the foundation of Western renewal. China and Russia still cast long shadows, but they now face a coalition defined not by coercion, but by credibility. Europe, once fractured by dependence, is discovering that autonomy can be outsourced, if the partner is trustworthy enough. For Canada, this is more than economic success. It's strategic evolution. A country once viewed as a middle power is now a balancing power, shaping the flow of energy, capital, and standards across the Atlantic. Its geography is no longer just vast, it's valuable. Its diplomacy, once quiet, now defines how the West organizes itself in the age of transition. You've been watching Geocapitalist, where we follow the money shaping the next century. If this breakdown helped you see the bigger picture, I recommend you watch this next video. It connects directly with how Canada's Atlantic Revolution is redrawing Europe's energy map. Subscribe and share so you don't miss the next chapter, where we explore how this partnership could soon expand beyond energy into digital infrastructure and defense. This was Europe's Green Revolution now depends on Canada, and it's changing the balance of power. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.